Hello and welcome to another episode of Nature with You. This week marks another episode of Nature in the Movies, where my co-host Jackson and I explore nature themes in movies. This week's episode is all about the Wicked franchise. The Wicked movies are directed by Jon M and produced by Marc Platt Productions. Please note that there are spoilers for the entire franchise throughout the episode. We decided to join the conversation on how Wicked reflects a lot of environmental issues. And yeah, where should we start, Jackson?
I think the big thing to start with, and the kind of most obvious one, is like the treatment of animals in the universe.
I agree. Yeah, we see that build up throughout both movies. We'll be talking about both movies in this episode, but so in the beginning flashback, when Glinda's talking about Elphaba being born, we see animals with actual occupations, like the doctor, I think it's a wolf or something, and Dulcibear's her nanny / nurse. And then we see less and less. There's only 2 professors at Shiz who are animals. So there's definitely, at the beginning, it's not as obvious, but it gets progressively more obvious.
I think it's interesting seeing the animals having the general role in the society and having, like, they're just functioning as normal sentient beings. There's really no, besides of the physical way they look, there's no distinguishing factors between what an animal and a human is, or whatever Aussians consider themselves to be. And I do think it's interesting kind of looking at it from an environmental lens of how we treat animals and comparing it to our world and what we do with animals. So it's fascinating kind of looking at the differences in how normalized it is, at least at the beginning of the movie, but it definitely progresses into something completely different, which I think is where the story really takes place.
Yeah, and I think it really makes us ask ourselves, like, what's really, like, morally right, or just because we're used to obviously putting animals in cages, even if we treat them well, if we go out or something. I don't know. Everybody has different practices, but it just makes us think, like, when they take away Dr. Dillamond during his class, that just seems really barbaric, and just the immediate turn to, oh, this is the invention of the cage. That's just completely flipping the switch, and kind of immediate propaganda there. Just like, this will help the animal, and they're very excited about it. Like, in what world?
No, it brings up an interesting, just like, philosophical point too. I read a book in one of my classes in my undergrad called Zoopolis, and it essentially went through, like, this idea of what if we gave animals the right to vote? What if we gave them, like, the same citizenship that we have as humans, because our policies affect them. We make policies every day that are directly affecting animals.
Yeah.
And we do things every day that are directly affecting animals. And whether it be like the squirrels that live on the streets, or the dogs and cats that we literally have domesticated and made to the point where they can't survive on their own and they're living with us. But yet we still get to make all their rules and make all their policies for them. It's an interesting debate of, like, how do you reconcile all of these decisions, and is there a way to come to happy agreement? It's an interesting book. Doesn't recommend to anyone listening. It was called Zoopolis. It's by Sue Donaldson and Will Kimlicka. But I think it's an interesting debate in this movie too. I think when you look at the way the animals are treated at the beginning, they are their own sentient beings. They are really functioning members of society. And then you progress to this war over whether animals should have their rights, should have their own persona. You start to see them lose the ability to talk, to lose the ability to function. And it's hard to watch. And I think that it does really beg the question of, what are we doing with animals in our world right now? And how are we treating them in this, like you said, barbaric way of putting them in cages and acting like that's okay?
Yeah, and it definitely brings up different ideas of how just how we respect animals, because obviously in our world that we know of, animals have never been able to talk. We don't, I guess there's that where they've never really been able to explicitly tell us what they want. But if you've ever had a pet or even just a connection with an animal, there's definitely some sort of way they try to communicate. And I know there's different, like, I'm sure people with, I don't know, neuroscience backgrounds or whatever, they're like, animals don't have the capacity to do whatever. But I don't know. They
do communicate with us, though. Yeah. Is the thing. Like, you see it in so many documentaries or whatever, like the way that dolphins can communicate, monkeys can communicate.
Yeah.
They might not speak the same way we do, but why is the way that we speak the only way to communicate, right? Why is that the only way that's a valid source of citizenship and democracy? And
yeah.
It is interesting that even though they don't speak like they do in the movie, like, they do have their own ways of communicating, and we opt not to see it because it's not convenient for us. Just like the wizard opts to silence them because it's not convenient for him and his goal of making Oz this utopia that he imagined.
Yeah, and it made me think of how we get a lot of resources from animals, whether that's meat or eggs or cheese, milk, things like that. And there are more respectful ways to get those resources through, like, organic farming versus factory farms, and where you're just, there's no consideration at all for animals. They're just stuffed into huge cages or pens. Yes, pens.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't necessarily have to, we're not saying, oh, you have to become a vegan or a vegetarian because of this movie, or that's not what they're trying to say, but it's just like, there are ways that you can do things that are humane and, you know, have a moral compass. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's obviously like an extreme of what they're doing in the movie, right? We're not taking every animal out of the world and trying to throw them all away in this world, but at the same time, you're right. Like, I think that there is a call to humanity in the movie. There's a call to just humanity of looking at the faces and the souls in front of you and saying, hey, how can I be more cognizant of what they're going through? How can I be more respectful to them and just more aware of what they're fighting too, because they are walking among us every day, dodging cars, breathing in our pollution, like all of this stuff that we've created, all of these structures we have. Like in the movie, when they created the cage, we've created so much more than a cage here.
Yeah.
And they have to do that on a daily.
Yeah. And it does, I feel like having this message in this movie does make me feel hopeful that various practices to create that humanity in our relationships with animals will progress further. Like, I think of some examples, like the creation of more wildlife crossings. I'm not sure if you're aware of what those are. Yeah, but you're right. We've created so many barriers for animals to just be able to live, especially live a carefree life that doesn't have to do with us. Obviously, they have their own structure with predators and the natural way of things, but roads are just, they interrupt and disturb so many ecosystems. The wildlife crossings, that's just one example, but it just, maybe this will spark more ideas like that.
I think it's so cool in the movie too how you see like all types of animals coming together to fight this cause. I think it's easy to single out certain animals, but you see everything from like predators and prey, domesticated animals and wild animals. Like, everyone in some way is really affected by the wizard's policies and the way that he's trying to control all of them when they are their own beings. And even in the second movie, when like Nessa Rose puts on that law that animals can't leave her land without having to go through her, we see just so much of every animal having that spotlight on them and that that impact to them.
Yeah, definitely. I like that too, because they may, I'm not even sure if they eat each other or what that looks like.
We don't really see much of their personal lives.
Yeah, but you're right, they do unite, and I think we can learn from that. It's like we need to learn how to better unite to solve big issues, and that's...
And you see how big of an issue it is because it does impact every animal, not just like certain ones.
Exactly, yeah. And
like you said, even those dogs and cats we have in our house, they're not immune. They're impacted by our stuff all the time.
Exactly.
I think if you're looking at the overarching themes surrounding like racism and immigration, you have these people that the society itself has been structured around, the Aussians and the wizard, and the people that have been very much in control have made it so the animals are already at an inherent disadvantage.
Yeah.
And the wizard is just trying to further that by, one, really creating a fear against them, turning everybody else against them, saying that they're bad and they're scary and they're the reason that Oz is XYZ, and then using that as a force to drive them out, just as we see happening in our country right now and in our world right now, with the way that the administration is very much just trying to create fear around minorities who really aren't. There's a lot of them. There's a huge minority population in this country, and they're all humans at the end of the day, but the administration is very much putting this fear on them, saying, oh, they're bad, we have to drive them out, XYZ, just like the wizard does with the animals.
Yeah.
He just says, and it's because there is always this inherent structural disadvantage that the animals had.
Yeah. They refer to the Great Drought as the reason why the animals were blamed. And I just think, like, knowing a little bit more about animals just from studies, but also inferences about natural processes, animals generally just take what they need from the planet. Like, they take the resources they need, and when their needs are met, they generally move on to the next task or the next thing. And I just think humans are, or Aussians, whatever you identify as, are more likely to overdraw a resource. So it's like, obviously they weren't the cause of the Great Drought, but even if you put more thought into it and don't just take what someone is saying at face value, just add your own thoughts behind that, then you'll see that it's just silly. There's no way.
Exactly. And I mean, you can definitely see overconsumption in the Oz world with just the Emerald City alone, right?
Yeah.
There probably was a lot of that. It also puts into question, too, I think. We now know from the second movie when Madame Morrible causes that tornado that there is magic strong enough to manipulate the weather, not to be like Oz conspiracy theory, but there could have been someone doing that to blame the animals, because we saw time and time again Madame Morrible and the wizard manipulating things that people saw in order to blame the animals.
Yeah.
So I wonder what the history, like the true history, is there.
It really must be difficult to live in a world where there's magic and you really don't know what to trust. I know even in a world without magic, it is hard to...
Now we have AI.
We have AI, yeah.
How do you know what to trust with AI? Which is a whole different ballpark when thinking about the environment, but...
But yeah, you're right.
Out there.
It is. Whenever Madame Morrible creates the tornado to manipulate Elphaba, it's just like she's playing God, and she's playing the earth and the climate, and that's
right.
Yeah.
She's fully manipulating nature to try to get her own way.
Yeah.
And she kills a person in the process. But I think it's poetic that nature wins in the end, because bringing it back to the animals that she had gotten Elphaba to cast a spell on, the flying monkeys, are the ones that drag her off to prison at the end. So nature comes back and retaliates against her for the crimes that she committed by not only just wrecking the lives of all those animals, but manipulating it to then go and manipulate someone else. It's a fascinating cycle.
Yeah. And with the monkeys, I do think I loved that they could recognize that Elphaba was good, did care about them. Obviously, she gave them the wings, and that it was she was being manipulated. It was a mistake, but she owned it.
Yeah. She recognized multiple times in that movie that she should not have done that, and she felt bad.
Yeah.
And again, like you were saying, she was being manipulated. It's not like she even knew what she can't read it. She doesn't know what she's doing.
And it almost seems to take over her.
Felt so bad, I think, is important.
Yeah, and I do think animals can tell when someone has a demeanor that causes them fear, or whenever they know that someone does care for them. Like, you can really tell. If you approach an animal in a certain way, they're gonna react. And yeah, that's just like a little detail that I really appreciated.
We go back to communication too. Nonverbal communication is one of the most important things in any type of relationship, not just an animal-based one. Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into talking about how obviously Elphaba was ostracized throughout the whole first half of the first movie, and then the second movie pretty much the whole time.
She was ostracized the entire time.
Yeah, she was ostracized. Yeah.
She was never not.
She was ostracized the whole time throughout both movies, and I think that is a good representation of how people who fight for environmental rights in the real world, they often get labeled and like hippie, tree hugger, things like that, or even too extreme at the other end. And meanwhile, most people just want to create a good environment for all living beings and just create the respect that we've been talking about. I really identified with her, especially in the second movie, just how she was giving up her own happiness and just to help free animals from environments that were harming them. And that's just a really difficult decision to make.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that I hadn't even thought about. I think that you're so right. Like, she's cast aside for following her conscience and like doing what's good. I think the second movie has such an interesting thesis of what does the word good mean. Glinda tries to trademark it at the beginning.
Oh my gosh.
But finally learns what it really is, and that it isn't just action, but it's the heart and the intention. And I think that's what Elphaba learned too, is that she always had the heart and the intention, and it might not have gone her way and she was ostracized, but continue to find ways to further the movement even if it's not with her.
Yeah.
I think that was a really powerful part of the movie.
Yeah, and I think at some point people deserve to be happy too. And a lot of times I follow a few like environmental influencers, and something that they talk a lot about is how like we can't all be perfect in our own like daily actions. We may make choices that create more waste, or maybe support a corporation that has polluted a lot or whatever. And I think Elphaba finally learns that she doesn't have to fully give all of her joy and happiness up, and that she can still make a difference. Yeah. I think that's a big decision to make, and it's a big reality check for people. I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself to constantly be doing something, but we all have to take care of ourselves in order to advocate and do all these things that we're trying to do.
I think another thing that we could possibly talk about is the beauty of Oz. I think the production design of these movies is so good, and specifically like the tulip feel, all of just the nature shots you get when it's Munchkin Land and everything. I think it's super interesting. But then in the second movie, you see the yellow brick road come about. Yeah. And you see all the roads be built, destroying the land.
Yeah.
And not only destroying the physical land itself, but conveniently where the animals were living.
Yeah.
That it cut straight through the forest and the habitats, and they have to redesign their living space, which is symbolic of, again, the way that we have pushed animals out of their own space, out of the spaces that they always knew, into a new space. And then we've been like, actually, we're going to take that too with all these roads. So good luck finding another space. And we see animals pay the price for that all the time. We're in Maryland. Maryland drivers are horrible.
Horrible.
I kid you not, there is more roadkill on these interstates than I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous the amount of, like, roadkill I see here. And it's because there is so much road that has taken the place of animals here. And I think that's an interesting parallel. And in the second movie, then, that the animals, instead of fighting it, they have nothing they can do. They're out of hope. And they leave. They try to leave Oz. Alphabet tries to get them to stay, but they're like, we can't. We have nothing else we can do. We've lost all hope. We've lost all potential. Our only way out is literally out. And I think that was heartbreaking and sad. And again, it brings to all the things of immigration, but keeping in an environmental lens for it now, it really does highlight the way that changes to the environment, even if a small thing like a one paved yellow brick road, do have such a big impact on animals and the way that they exist.
Yeah, and it impacts animals, but if people don't care about that, it also impacts humans. Like by pushing more animal populations closer together, it increases how quickly diseases can be spread. And as we develop and we're closer to animals, then if they get diseases, we're more likely to get those from them. And we see that in a lot of ways. And I feel like that's something people aren't necessarily aware of, because it's just all about develop. But what are the consequences for us? But also what are the consequences for the environment, for all of these animals? It's not like they have somewhere else they can move, especially mammals, large mammals. And they can't swim across the ocean to somewhere else. Everywhere's getting developed, so it's not like they really have options. But there's just a lot that, isn't made aware, probably for a reason, much like what happens in Wicked.
Exactly. It very much is a haunting picture of our current landscape.
Yeah. And even, like you were talking about all the roadkill, I just feel like I hear people say, like, why are these animals even near the road? What do you mean? The road is in the animals'
their space. Right.
Space. Yeah. It just really shows the importance of framing, and how if we're told one thing growing up throughout our whole life, oh, these dang animals are always running across the road, yeah, of course you're going to have negative feelings towards them, or wonder why they would consider stepping on our developed turf. It's just so important to be careful of language whenever you talk about something. And yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of Nature with You. If you're interested in more content, please feel free to look at more episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow me on Instagram or Facebook. Thank you.